Hello everyone and welcome to my kitchen. Today I am going to be talking to you about bread. Now bread is so delicious. It is so just homey and comforting, just so good. And when I was a little girl, I remember my mom making fresh bread for us, and the house would just smell amazing. It would be so soft and light and pillowy when it would come out of the oven, and she'd let me get a warm piece of bread and put some syrup on it, and it was just so good. So that's one of the favorite memories that I have of my childhood. But funny thing, I didn't actually learn how to bake bread from my mom. I tried to bake bread probably in my 20s was when I started trying to bake my own bread, and it didn't really go so well. So I would about twice a year maybe try to make my own loaf of bread, and I'd try different recipes and things. And every time I would get disappointed, even if it was like the simple, easy, like, oh, you just have to stir these things together and then you have bread. Even those, like I struggled with making bread. I really could not unlock the key to making good bread, if you will. Sometimes all you need though is a little piece of information, a little tip that maybe nobody's telling you to unlock a whole realm of being able to make whatever your struggle is in the kitchen. I wanted to just share with you my tips that either I've come across and learned from somebody else, or the things that I've learned through trial and error myself, and how to get a good bread out of your kitchen. Now, I am by no means a professional bread baker or anything like that. So this isn't going to be like a high level video. This isn't going to be me telling you what ratio of this you need to this. I am not that smart. I know that there are a lot of bread bakers out there, a lot of sourdough bakers and micro bakeries that have very exact things that they follow, measurements, equations, things like that. And that's fantastic, and that works for them. I am a home baker. I would phrase my food as being rustic, which means it's good, but it ain't fancy. So that in mind, this video is for those people that are in a place where I was, where I could not figure out how to make good bread. But now that I have figured it out, quote unquote, because there's always more to learn. But now that I have roughly figured out what I'm doing with bread, I make us bread every week. It serves us well. It's always, and it's never not exciting. It's always exciting when a loaf of bread comes out of the oven and it's good, because I struggled with it for so long that it's just super exciting to me when it comes out good. And now more times than not, it comes out good. And if it doesn't come out good, I usually know what to tweak to fix it. My first tip for you is to always test or activate your yeast. Now, I use just dry active yeast, so that is what I'm familiar with. I know there are some rapid rise options out there where you just sprinkle that straight into your flour. If you are using dry active yeast, which comes in little granules basically, and you can get a large pack of it or you can get small little packets in the store. And basically when you're using that, you want to put it into some warm water to activate it. And this is basically testing your yeast and making sure that it's alive. But here's the important thing. You want your water to be at the right temperature for this. Now, you don't necessarily have to like get out a thermometer and put it into your water. It's not actually a bad idea, but if you don't want to get that fussy, you don't have to. But you do want your water to be warm. Yeast doesn't really like extremes of temperature. So if your water is too hot, which would be above 115 degrees, if your water is too hot, then your yeast is going to die. You're going to kill out your yeast. And if your water is too cold, it's not going to like that either. So your water you want to have warm around the range of 115 degrees or a little bit less. I tend to go a little bit less myself. So what I will do is I will just heat up some water for 25-30 seconds in the microwave, dip my pinky into it. If it feels warm to my finger, but not like, oh, that's hot. If it feels just warm, then I know I'm good to go, and I will go ahead and put my yeast into that. And then what you want to do is just let your yeast sit in that warm water after you've stirred it in, of course. You want to just let your yeast sit in that water for between 5 to 10 minutes. Usually 5 is enough. But you want to just make sure that it foams up, basically, that you're seeing bubbles, that you're seeing action in there. It's not just sitting dormant. If it's sitting dormant, it is probably dead. And that could be because of heat exposure, which means you may have your water too hot, or it could be, it's not necessarily you, or it could be that the yeast itself was exposed to heat somewhere else. And this is actually why it's super important to control the environment your yeast is in. So if you're going to buy yeast ahead of time and have it in your backstock for using, you want to make sure that it is not exposed to heat. So don't put it in like a cabinet above your oven or anything like that, because that will potentially kill your yeast, and you don't want that experience. So the best place to store your yeast is actually in the freezer. If you've watched any of my bread making videos in the past, you've probably seen this random spaghetti jar come out of the freezer, and that's because I buy my packs of yeast in a pretty big pack, but it's very low cost. It's like, for a pack that's like this big, it's like $5. It's not expensive at all. But I'll buy it in a pack like that, just transfer it to a jar, and I just keep it in my freezer, and I use it straight out of the freezer, and I've had phenomenal success with that. I've had very limited success with buying packets from the store. So I don't know if it's because it's too old or if it's because it was exposed to heat somewhere around there, but I have not had great success with buying the packets. Tip 2. Sugar feeds yeast. So if you have a recipe that says warm water, yeast, and then a nominal amount of sugar or some kind of sweetener, honey, molasses, what have you, it is probably for feeding the yeast. And so what you want to do in that situation where you have a sweetener in your recipe is you want to go ahead and mix it in with the warm water and the yeast, because that is going to quicken the yeast activating, because it feeds the yeast. If you're one of the people that loves to just kind of test things and see how they work, this is actually a great little experiment that you can do. So get a measuring cup with warm water, get another one with warm water, stir yeast into both, but stir just a teaspoon of sugar into one of them. And you should see a marked difference between how much the one with sugar rises versus the one without sugar. You don't have to put sugar in your bread recipe. It's perfectly fine without it. Bread can be made just with flour, water, and salt, basically, and yeast. But it does feed it. So if you see like a very small amount of sugar in a recipe, that's probably why it's there. Now, on the opposite side of that, salt actually retards yeast. So yeast loves sugar, but it doesn't like salt that much. So, of course, your recipe for bread is going to have salt in it, but what you want to do with that salt, you want to actually just mix that in with the flour. And if you have a recipe where everything's just all going into one bowl right from the start, what you want to do is you want to put your yeast over by where the sugar is in that recipe, but you want to keep it away from where the salt is just out of the gate until that yeast activates. So if you've got everything in one bowl, sugar and yeast on one side and salt on the other side, you can definitely use salt in your bread. I absolutely recommend it. A undersalted bread is very underwhelming, but you just want to know where to mix it in. So don't mix mix it in with your warm water and your yeast. You don't want to do that. Just mix it in with the flour, and then after that yeast has activated, everything's going to be fine. My next tip for you is about the amount of flour that you're going to use, and it will vary widely. Even sometimes in the same recipe, if you're making it once and you're making it another time, you might use different amounts of flour. And a good recipe is going to tell you that. It's going to basically tell you this is an estimate, or it's going to give you a range, like between 5 and 7 cups of flour. And I know as an inexperienced bread baker, you're going to look at that and be like, well, which is it? Is it 5 or 7 cups? Because you want it to be exact to lead you to success. But the thing is, to be successful with bread making, it is going to be kind of a range and kind of an estimate. But another thing that a good bread recipe will tell you is what type of dough you're looking for. It should describe the dough and the end result that you're wanting to get from it. So in most cases, if you are doing a kneaded bread that is going to rise once or twice, you're going to be looking for a firm, elastic dough. So it will, this is my favorite type of dough, it will feel very pleasing to your fingers. When you're done with the kneading process, it should be kind of like memory foam, where you can stick your finger into it. It's not sticking back on your finger. It just kind of reforms back to what it was. And that is my favorite type of dough. And that one is very easy to look for because, of course, you can always just stick your finger in it and see if it's done. If it's all a cohesive ball, you know, you're pretty much good. Smooth, elastic, not tacky, firm, pliable, anything like that is going to indicate that's the type of dough that you're looking for. Other ways that doughs can be described is tacky. So if it wants you to do a slightly tacky dough or a tacky dough, that's going to be about one stage before you get to that smooth, elastic bowl. And basically what you're looking for there is it should all form together pretty well, but there might still be a little bit of it around your mixing bowl if you're using a mixing bowl, or if you're using your hands to knead it, it's still going to be a little sticky, not gloopy, like it's not going to be like stuck to your fingers. But just like with the smooth elastic, if you touched it, it would just kind of bounce back and it wouldn't stick to your finger. If you're looking for a slightly tacky dough, then you want it to be a little bit sticky on your finger. If your recipe is calling for a shaggy dough, these would normally be the types of like no knead recipes where you're not kneading it on a counter or anything like that. And this is basically the first stage after everything's already gotten combined in there. So it's going to be very much thinner of a dough, kind of. It's not going to use as much flour. It's definitely going to be sticking to the sides of whatever bowl that you mixed it in, and it's going to be very sticky. So that's going to be a shaggy dough for you. Those are the three that I generally come across: shaggy, slightly tacky, firm, elastic. And the shaggy one is going to be more of a like longer rise time normally because it's a no knead dough. There's not like one that's better than the other. It all just depends on what you like to make all three of them, but those are basically the stages that you're looking for, and that is what's going to adjust how much flour you need, because you want to look at what the description of the dough is. And then if you say, for example, your bread dough calls for 3 cups of flour, if you've reached that 3 cups of flour, but you're supposed to have a elastic ball of dough and you have a slightly tacky ball of dough, you need to add a little bit more flour. And just eyeball it is basically what I can tell you. Just eyeball it, but what you specifically want to pay attention to is not how much flour you're directed to use, but what the description of the dough is, and that will get you to the level of success. So what changes where one day you need a certain amount of flour and the next day, if you're using the same recipe, it might be different? Well, there can be a lot that goes into it. One thing is how you're measuring your flour out. It may be that you over measured flour one of the days, like packing flour into your cup measure, which is not recommended. If you're using a cup measure, you should be spooning the flour into it. If you've watched my videos, you know I don't always do that. But you want to like loosen up your flour before you dip your cup measure in there, because that can make a big difference in how much flour you're actually getting in there. And really the most exact way to do it is by measurement on a scale. So if you can use like the grams on there or the ounces, that will give you a more exact result every time. So if you care about an exact result every time, I highly recommend getting a kitchen scale. I do not always do that. A lot of times I go with cups and it works for me. Also, what season you're in can change that. The humidity in the air can change whether you need more or less flour, and also altitude. So where you are on sea level, that kind of thing can also change that. So you may have a recipe that's telling you 6 to 7 cups, and maybe it's less than that for you to get the correct amount of dough, or maybe it's more than that to get the correct amount of dough. Again, you just want to refer to what type of dough you're looking for. If your recipe has a video or pictures along with it that show you if it's a smooth dough, a shaggy dough, that's going to be immensely helpful in just making sure that you get the correct amount of flour in there. Now, my next tip is probably my biggest one for you if you are struggling with making bread, because I think this is the thing that was going wrong with most of my bakes prior to learning this tip. And so what I do to proof my bread, to rise my bread at least the first time around, is I use my Instant Pot. I have a yogurt setting on my Instant Pot, which is a medium heat setting, so it's not high, it's not really hot, it's just like a medium warm. And I will normally set this for half an hour to an hour, depending on what my recipe calls for the rise time. I basically cut that in half and rise it in my Instant Pot. And this has changed my life as far as baking bread. It really makes a huge difference. My kitchen tends to run cold unless I have the oven on. And I don't want to just turn the oven on to let dough sit there for an hour and rise. That seems silly to me. But I think that this was the biggest problem that I was having in the past when I was having failures, was because it wasn't rising enough. Because at that time, what I was looking for in the recipe was, they would say, let your dough rise until doubled, 2 to 4 hours. Okay, so check it at 2 hours, it ain't going anywhere. Check it at 3 hours, it's a little bit bigger. Check it at 4 hours, it's a little bit bigger, but it's not quite doubled. And I just go with it because I let it sit there for 4 hours. Of course, I'm going to just bake it at this point. But it wasn't getting what your dough needs while it's rising. So, using my Instant Pot on the yogurt setting completely changed this for me, because within half an hour, I would have a dough that was doubled, puffy, nice, ready to go. And the texture of the bread itself was really good. So if you underproof your bread, the texture of your end result is going to be affected. Now, similarly, you can overproof it and that messes with the texture too, but I've had a lot less problems with overproofing something. I will not say I've had none. I have overproofed my bread before, but I've had a lot less problems with that result than I have with underproofing it. So if you have an Instant Pot with a yogurt or a medium setting, let me tell you, if you're struggling, just try it at least once and see if it makes a difference for you, because it could be that you're having the same problem that I was, where I didn't realize that it was underproofed at the time that I put it in my oven. Also, in case you're wondering, when I do that, when I use my Instant Pot to proof my bread, I do not put the Instant Pot lid on it. I will just cover it with a towel so that it is covered. You don't want it to get like a hard skin on the dough, but you also don't want to like close it in there. You're not pressure cooking it. You're just letting it sit there in a nice, warm, happy environment. Now, how do you know when your bread is done? This is another thing that it can be so easy to get wrong. And a lot of folks will tell you you can use an instant read thermometer, and you can. Normally, you're looking for about 190 to 200 degrees on the interior of your loaf to tell if it's done. And while I heavily rely on my instant read thermometer when I'm cooking meat, I don't tend to rely on it when I'm cooking bread. I actually kind of look for other cues when I'm cooking bread, baking bread. Anyway, so what I will do if I'm using a bread pan, like a rectangular bread pan, the first thing that I check for is when my time's starting to come up, the house smells amazing, smells like bread, I will kind of take it and dump it out of the bread container, just gently, like not like boom, I will just kind of like tilt it on its side, and if I can tell that the bread releases easily, that's my first sign that we're probably done. Next thing though, because I do freeform breads as well, where they're just on a pan, so it's not necessarily going to stick the same way it would in a loaf pan, but I will still pick it up. And your second clue is you want it to sound hollow, so the bottom should be nicely golden, and if you tap on it, holding it with an oven mitt, by the way, but if you tap on it, it should sound hollow, and if it sounds hollow, you should be good to go ahead and pull that loaf from the oven. And of course, check for crust color as well. Like I recently did some French bread, and obviously there's a hot spot in my oven because the one French bread looked phenomenal, like straight out of a magazine, and the other one was so pale. So I just had to twist it around and leave that one in a little bit longer just to get that nice little tan that it needed. And then my very last tip for you. Do not cut your bread right away when it comes out of the oven, even if it sounds hollow, even if it came out of the pan easily. Just give it some time to chill. It is so tempting to cut into your bread right away. I know the house smells amazing and you just want to try it and you just want to see if you did it, if you made bread. But it's not totally done cooking even when you take it out of the oven. It's still got a lot of heat in there, and if you cut into it right away, it will kind of stop that process, and you might end up with more of a stodgy bread than you want, more like thick and dense than you want, not as light and fluffy. So you want to at least let your bread sit for about 20 minutes before you cut into it. But I promise you, it will still be warm after the 20 minutes are done, so you are good to still have a nice, warm, fresh piece of bread. Now, are there more tips for bread? Absolutely, 100%. There is always some other method for making bread, different ways that you can do it, sourdough, fresh milled flour, all kinds of things. Bread is basically a rabbit hole. You never stop learning bread, but this should be enough to get you on your way, that if you have not yet made your first successful loaf of bread, or maybe you have, but you're not quite sure why it was successful, maybe this will help a little bit. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave me a like or leave me a comment. I appreciate you watching. Thank you so much and have a great day.